To the Mortal Realms, an Age of Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path to the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies across the coast of Tusks this episode are...
Hey guys, did you know that arborists all through Thondia are super excited?
Why?
Because there's this new species of tree. You might have heard of it. It's called the Kron's pine.
Will, you're next.
So, you want me to go to Thondia, but I hardly know ya.
Josh, you're up.
Well, we are here to get you in touch with your primal self as we savagely cover the Age of Beasts.
And I'm Aaron. And 525,600 seconds. How do you measure a life in Ghur? And Paul, I'm going to need your help with this. Seasons of... There you go. I appreciate it. In this episode, we cover the lore of Seasons of War Thondia. And dear listeners, inside you, there are two beasts. One yearns to learn more about the Ghurish lands of Thondia, about the places and history of that feral place. And the other wants to be regaled with a tale of one of the first encounters of those mystical manifestations of the realms known as Incarnates. Which beast wins? Well, both of them, because we're going to be doing both of those things in this very episode. But before we do, how are you doing tonight, gentlemen?
Splendid.
Ooh, splendid's good. We don't get splendid a lot. Fantastic. Okay, we hear that every once in a while. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I went first and I like totally lowballed it. And then everybody just like accelerated. I was like, good was pretty good, I thought. No.
That's the peril of going first. But then you also don't have to worry about people, like, you don't have to worry about someone taking your intro if you go first. Like, you got there first, so that's so it's nice.
I mean, nobody would tell as bad of jokes as I do, so...
I bet you Klaus knows, but there was a time where, I think one time in history, where someone was going to make the same intro joke as another person. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm sure
that would be hard.
Has an idea.
For that,
yeah, it was wild. So it sounds like everybody's doing great. We're here. We're going to do a story phase. We're going to talk about Seasons of War Thondia. But before we do, we'll start, as we often do, with checking in with everybody and seeing what they've been up to lately in the hobby. So let's do that now. We'll go in the same order. Paul, what have you been up to in the hobby?
I have actually been working on Archaon.
No way.
Yeah. I decided that I was going to paint up Archaon, and so my color scheme is a little weird, and it's going to take a while, but I'm super excited to be able to do that. So,
how many of the heads are going to be spider heads?
None of them. So the story is that way back in the day when this model got released, I was quoted in White Dwarf with my real name saying how awesome the model is. And so I've wanted to paint it up for forever, and I just have not gotten around to it. And so I need to paint this model unconverted because I'm literally quoted in White Dwarf saying how good this model is. Then maybe I can convert one.
You gotta get the OG first.
One man first.
Yeah.
The White Dwarf is a legally binding document.
Totally.
Everybody knows that.
Got my name on it and everything.
That's why I sign every single one that I get. Also, because like if anybody ever wants it, I feel like it could be like a collector's item eventually. Like, if this podcasting thing ever takes off.
In history.
Yeah.
Do you sign it in like regular pen, or do you have like a cool metallic pen that you sign it in, like real superstars?
In my own blood.
Oh, wow.
It's more Warhammer than that.
Calligraphy.
I mean, if you signn it in skulls, maybe that'd be more Warhammer. I don't know.
It'd be tricky to do. But
blood would work.
Yeah, I think blood's okay.
Yeah.
Corn cares not. Will, hey, what have you been up to? And I don't know why I said Zahabi before, but now I feel like I got to keep saying it.
I have been painting up some Ideneth Deepkin. Yeah. Did a few conversions, making some like vampire Achelian King, and I'm really liking it so far.
All right. Very cool. Anything else to add? Well, I'll keep going.
Nope.
All right. Right on. Hey, Josh. Hey, what have you been doing in the hobby today?
Vint and I have been working on getting everything ready for the Warcry narrative event, May 22nd at Pegasus Games locally. Awesome. Gotten flyers up and everything ready. We're set. We got our first registrant. So perfect. It's gone well. But
nice.
Also getting lists together for Path of Glory KO. I'm excited about. And getting involved into some of the narrative online community, like the Hungering Steps, which would be kind of fun to start participating in. I'm looking forward to that.
I hear whoever runs that's a pretty cool dude.
And handsome.
Yeah, exactly.
And modest.
I don't know about those.
I never said that. All right, I'm very, very cool. And for mine, I'm just slowly working through daughter stuff. So I think I moved on to the Kiranai, the winged gals.
Nice.
So those are. First of all, I hate whips, but I also hate spindly wing bits too. So add them to the list of awful.
Why did you even pick up this army? It's like all whips and spindly bits.
Because they're there, Paul. Like, why did people climb Everest? Why do?
It must be done.
Yeah.
It must be done.
I feel like it would be remiss if we didn't also mention that we went to Adepticon between the last time that we recorded them.
You can't prove it. You have no evidence.
Yeah, there literally is a picture of
pictures.
us all sitting at Adepticon. I literally exactly can prove it. So, yeah.
Nah, that ain't me. No, we were there, and it was a hoot. So, I mean, I guess I'll just say that was my first Adepticon. It might have been some others' first as well. But what a delight! People weren't kidding. That it was a joy, even to be there just for the short few days that I wasn't able to stay for the whole thing. So it was great. Thanks for everybody here who let me just sort of hover behind them, just as a hanger on. That really made all the difference. So, but I guess not to take over this conversation, but all the people that I met at Adepticon too, you know who you are, because Lord knows I don't. But it was a pleasure meeting each and every one of you.
Except for those that you crushed in Underworlds, apparently.
I don't know that I crushed anyone. That's not true.
You made Phil sweat. That was good.
Yeah. No, that was like my 10th or 11th. And I feel like every year I go, it just keeps getting better. So it's totally worth it. So, yeah.
Right on.
And it was awesome to have everybody there. And get a picture. Like, that was
Yeah,
super
it was
cool.
Great.
I know. We just missed Pavin. It was bad he couldn't make it.
I'm sensing a trend looking at this here episode. Just
And we got a full house picture too. I mean, who gets to do that? Like, it's super awesome.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Anyway, that was my aside. I apologize.
No apologies needed. Definitely necessary. All right. So any other final what people have been up to thoughts before we jump into this here story phase? Awesome and great. Paul, you know what to do.
The story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms.
We sure do. But in this particular story phase, we'll be delving into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of a singular realm, and that realm is Ghur. Guys, it really took me a long time to realize that Ghur is the realm of beast. I never put two and two together. Yeah, until very, very recently.
Like 6 years? Did it take you 6 years to pick up?
Yeah, well, I mean, longer, right? Because Ghur was always the wind of magic. Like, I should have known even in fantasy, but I never really put it together, too.
Wow. That's fair. I didn't pick that up in fantasy. It was only when the Mortal Realms, and I'm like, oh, it's the realm of beasts. I get it.
I don't want to tell you how much time I spent going then through all the other realms to see if those two were something, and I don't think they are.
It's like one of those license plates where you got to say it out loud to get right.
Yeah, true.
Like, oh.
That's right. That's a good point.
To that point, do you know why all of the light mages have snakes on them?
No.
It's because the wind of magic is hish.
You think it'd be a really quiet realm. But at any rate, we're here to talk about the Seasons of War Thondia. So I suppose we could maybe talk about how we got here. That's maybe a good place to start, right? I feel like that's what we do for our campaign books, those books that are set squarely in a story, right? Mm-hmm. Or in like I'm not just story, but it's set squarely in a timeline or in a point in history, I suppose. Yeah.
My old what is that? Not thread. My old standby.
Hallmark standby. There you go. Yeah. I'll let you take it away if you want to talk about where we are now and how did we get here. I'm open to all inputs.
So this narrative basically starts right after Dominion, the box set. And not only does it start right after, it picks up even on a couple of the characters, which is super fun, awesome, amazing times.
Oh man, do I love continuity.
When characters
can't get enough. Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So basically AOS 3.0, we've got the whole Necroquake, we have the Age of Sigmar, and we had Alariel's Right of life, and then 3.0 drops right after Broken Realms, and that's literally where we are right now. So just slightly progressed from that events of the box set and the Amberstone Watch battle. So
It certainly feels like this was the first book where they picked it up like immediately after the end of the last thing that came out, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, it is super interesting. I hate that word now. It is super compelling that they picked up on one of the box sets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because typically the box sets end up as a little paragraph in a battle tome. Mm-hmm. And this is the opposite of that.
I was initially worried that it was just going to be like, oh yeah, the box set happened and it's definitely a real thing. But like, I really feel like this book lends more weight to those battles that took place when people first started with the third edition.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like the some of the box sets, it used to be that the events would occur in them. Like battle boxes and other starter sets. The events would occur in them, and then the events would occur, and then they'd start referencing them later. Or like, again, like Paul said, like as a blurb or a paragraph somewhere else. But this, to your point, and to sort of reiterate what was just said, like this is the first time I agree that the events from a box set clearly lead into something. It's the first time the characters have been held onto. Or, those characters that are named in the story but aren't named or have their own models per se. Like Injustice is sort of going to be around in perpetuity, but like the other characters that stem from that story don't have their own models, but like they are not eternally identified in these stories, but like they continue on. And if anybody follows me at all, do I love continuity? I do. So that was one of the highlights of this book. It's such a small thing, it's such a minor consideration, but I was delighted to see it here.
Well, but at the same time, you say it's a minor thing, but I think it's a really important thing because the characters are who we resonate with, right? And that's also a point that I really like about this book is that to a certain extent, it almost feels like a Black Library book because it has specific characters and it tells their story from their perspective. And this is the first time in Age of Sigmar when we have gotten specific direct books in the place where we're talking about. And so we started out in Ghur, right, with the General's Handbook, but now we're specifically in Thondia, and we also have Kragnos, which just came out, which I understand was supposed to release with Broken Realms, but also Hallowed Ground that's taking place in Thondia as well. And so we have like almost a triptych of stories right now in this specific place and time within, say, 20 years. And that's pretty amazing and fantastic because it adds so much depth. And like, I feel like I know Thondia now. Yeah. And that's a new feeling for me. Like I know Excelsis and I've been there so many times. And then to take my knowledge of Excelsis and expand it out into Thondia as a whole is just super fun.
Yeah, I agree. Though I will say, if any of you out there aren't fans of Thondia, now's a bad time to be into Age of Sigmar. That's really all you're getting. All right. So given that we're talking about how we got here, the book kindly lays out a little bit of history of this region of Thondia, similar to how they lay out a history in these battle tomes, right? So they lay histories out for different factions in their battle tomes. It's almost like this Season of War Thondia book is a battle tome for the setting of Thondia. And we get that same type of timeline here for, events that are pertinent to the region. And so I see no reason why we can't run through this timeline like we do with our battle tomes, if it would please the court, and the court is you guys.
Yes,
so it starts in the Age of Myth, which is the beginning. It's a very good place to start. Did any stories from back then catch your eye for you folks that you wanted to talk about back then?
I really liked Prince of the Draconith talking about Karazai, because when the Stormcast Battle Tome came out, we were told that Karazai went out and just started hitting things. Or this story leads into the repercussions of that a little bit, of like, he's why the Cruel Boys went into hiding, because they saw him just hitting things and they were like, nope, we're going to get out of here. And just like goes to show that like the hatred that Kragnos brought about has lasted since the Age of Myth.
Yeah, it's very cool. I like that one.
Yeah, Will stole mine. That's
Oh
fine.
no!
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. Good, great minds think alike, sir.
There's this one where the story's called Beast at Bay, but the story is not necessarily the most interesting part to me.
Grabbing my second one.
I just wanted to point the particular thing that I found interesting was that I always wondered what about it of the realm of beasts would draw people to like live there, right? Or why would it be a good resource for civilization? Because it seems it's very anathematic to civilization. But they talk about in this Beast at Bay how there's a lot of trade that can come out of Ghur, and that it's a lot of like meat and fish, and like that seems so obvious to me now, but it didn't even occur to me that like that's one of their main exports, right? Is the export of food. Which makes a lot of sense that it civilized folks can still be hunters, right? They're still gathering food or prey or however you want to phrase it, and that is reason enough to try and tame the wilds of Ghur. And so it was an interesting point that I hadn't really thought of before. But Josh, why did you find it interesting?
Yeah, the same reason. Kind of like a peek into the life of people who live in Thondia and what their jobs might be. In these outposts that they can hunt and survive and provide unique meats as well as furs and other things to other realms. So that was pretty cool. And how they kind of like negotiated through conflict by doing these duels or champion on champion battles rather than all out war. I thought was an interesting way to handle conflict in such a savage realm.
So what I'm hearing is the answer to the perpetual question of where are the farmers? There were no farmers. They just all got food from the realm of Ghur. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's like hunter-gatherers, but just hunters, really, in Ghur.
I really liked the predator and prey story. It was a little thing, and like it doesn't have that much to it. But I love the idea that it says evidence of the struggles of humans in Ghur remain in the cave paintings and carvings they left behind, many of which depict the wars of the monsters in their midst.
Mm-hmm.
That just seemed really like completely useless, but like super fun little narrative idea that like you could live in a cave or with cave paintings and stuff like that. It just adds a lot of depth to the history, and I enjoy stories like that.
Yeah, especially if you think about like Gorka Morka tromping around at that time, slaying giant god beasts and stuff. Yeah, I'd be in a cave too.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, Yumnog and all that. So
right. Exactly.
So I know I already took one. I shouldn't use another one. There's the other story, the Pantheon Broken. I want to bring that up because I love when we find out stories or like motivations or reasons why each of the realms fell to chaos. Right. So we know as the audience that the age of chaos is on its way. Right. The age of myth can't last forever. And so it's always fun to dive into the unique reasons why each of the mortal realms like fall. In that in Hish, it was the whole what's it called, the Okari Dowry of the Lumineth, like that the spire fall of the Lumineth.
Right.
I never really understood specifically why Ghur fell to chaos or what the cause was there, but it talks about it here in that. They had this pantheon of gods in the Age of Myth. We've talked about that before at different times. Gorka Morka was part of that pantheon at one point. It says here that no one knows exactly why Gorka Morka snapped, but he ends up giving up on the pantheon. It says, screw all this and let's loose his greenskins, who then go on a terror in the realm of Ghur, and elsewhere, everywhere probably. And so because of this, it's all the harder to survive for non-greenskin civilized cultures in Ghur, and they do what they can to survive, but they have to. Some of them have to, give in to, what do they call it here? They call it cults of blood and slaughter, and these sort of prehistoric tribes, and you could consider them just to survive. So them falling to Khorne, which makes sense. He seems the chaos god to most align with like the ethos of Ghur. They have to. They have to turn to Khorne to help try and save them from these, rampaging, orcs across the landscape, because it seems like that's the only way that they can stand up to these forces. And so I thought that was interesting. That's a very Ghurish way to fall to chaos. And so add that to the list. Anybody have anything else to add before we shift ages?
No.
Simple thing.
Nope.
Right? Easy to do. All right. So let's talk about the Age of Chaos. So Yeah. Did any stories here that might have grabbed you? What does chaos look? What did the Age of Chaos look like in Gur and in Thondia?
Yeah, it's a pretty short section.
Yeah.
Corn floods the area. Demons, of course, but it does include a little bit of the tidbits about Indrasta and and the demon lord that she fights against, Doombreed, and how another section of this book they talk about how Doombreed's reputation still lies in the memory of many of the cultures in Gur. But yeah, so it kind of talks about Indrasta and how she was a warrior queen, and many of the different Stormcast or civilizations that survived through chaos remember her, which is kind of cool to read about.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like the Age of Chaos can be summed up in such a way that the human civilizations are like the civilizations of order. It's a matter of running, a matter of hiding, a matter of trying to avoid chaos as best you can, because like the landscape was already pretty feral and savage, and now it's just been ramped up to 11. However, it ends up being that the biggest, I don't want to say objectors, that's not the biggest quote unquote defense, though I can't imagine ever playing defense to chaos, is going to be those forces of destruction, right? It's not so much the forces of order holding the forces of chaos back, but it's the orcs and the goblins and the ogres and the gargants. So it's weird. It's hard to even imagine a destruction force, playing defense, but in some ways, a good offense is the best defense, and that's both, these very aggressive factions going head to head in Gur, because Gur wouldn't have it any other way. Right. So that seems to be a theme that we see a lot of in these stories in the Age of Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It's super interesting to me because for like most every other faction, the Age of Chaos is like the history of the realm or the history of the faction, and it helps shape who they are. But to your point, Aaron, like for Gur, it's mostly destruction, and to them, the Age of Chaos was just a big fight. Like nothing really changed for them during this age that kind of ruined everyone else.
Yeah, right. Like I would imagine they thrived. Is that the word? Thrived. In this thrived. Right? Yeah, thriven. They were thriven in this time frame, which I think we might have touched on a little bit in the Orc War Clans battle tome, but like we see it here too.
Yep.
And then it's also around this time I think that Gordrak emerges as well.
I thought that was interesting because I was trying to place that in perspective in terms of the beginning of Age of Sigmar. They mentioned Gordrak. To the current timeline. How many years is that? Is he really that long lived?
I suppose, right? Like, I know they have a hard time.
Like hundreds of years? Could
be. Are greenskins the sort of thing where they just live and they grow until someone kills them? Like, is that, I don't know. They can't be, are they immortal? Is that what it is?
I don't know. That's what I was wondering. I know in 40K, they kind of like keep getting bigger as they fight. But, in terms of AOS, I don't know what it was. But I was like, wow, if he was out at the beginning of the Age of Sigmar, he's got to be pretty old.
Yep. His model was one of the first armies. It was in one of the first armies, right? Because it was Iron Jaws.
Yeah.
And so because his model was released so early on, at this point, functionally, if he's still a character in the story, he's hundreds of years old. You're absolutely correct.
Right. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's any other like named characters that should have died by now that are not. Like, I mean, we've got our god characters and like our supernatural characters.
Stormcast are immortal. And,
yeah. So there's that. I guess that's more of an aside. We'll think about that.
I mean, the Dwarden, I was just reading the White Dwarf for KO today, and one of them talks about how he remembers when they lived on the ground. So
he's got to be super old. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like he was part of the Kazalit kingdom before they ascended into the sky, and he still remembers what it was like to live in the realm of metal.
Do you remember?
That's like thousands of years.
Yeah. Well, dwarves and elves definitely long lived, but that's pretty cool.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, we were talking about KO before, but what's that guy with the main named guy? How old is that dude? He's got to be super old.
Bugman? Totally, really.
Oh no. With the top hat.
He's immortal.
The mustache.
The mustache guns.
And Baraknar, the
Lord Magnet.
The High Magnet. Yeah, the Lord Magnet. Yeah.
He's got to be very old. Anyways.
I'll say I just had a weird theory.
Lay it on me.
Semi-related. The reason why they didn't bring Felix back in Gotrek and Felix is because Felix would have then died of old age. So they had to replace him with Stormcast and elves.
Sure, true.
Yep. That's fair.
The only thing that Gotrek can't punch or axe is time marching ever onward.
Yeah.
Dear friend.
If you're really yearning for a bard in Age of Sigmar, you should read, what is that? Laukavai.
That is next on my list.
I hear it's good.
Yeah, it's really good. And there's a central character who is a bard.
Nice.
He's not Felix by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it's also set in Gur in a free city called the Colonnade. So there's a lot of Gurry feeling to it as well.
Guys, it's grr, like an animal. Grr.
Yes. Yeah.
What genius. So clever. Anyways, all right, let's move on over to the Age of Sigmar. Now, a lot of this is they didn't stretch with some of the stories that they included here. A lot of this is the big beats that we've seen since Age of Sigmar is released. But maybe there were some tidbits that you guys found interesting in this here age. Did anything jump out at you folks in the Age of Sigmar?
Yeah, there was a couple things that grabbed my interest. The stomping. I had read in a couple places where the denizens of Gur, at least the Aurochs and ogres and stuff, kind of felt this like thumping noise, this kind of pounding in their headaches. It's like the heartbeat of Gur, which I thought was interesting. It was kind of alluded to before, but I didn't quite understand what it was until kind of reading this section here, that they were hearing this primal awakening of the realm, which was kind of cool.
If you want to hear more about the primal awakening of the realm, you should read Caragnos.
Okay. Yes. No, I keep hearing that's really good. And you guys did the review. I haven't not read that yet, so I got to do that. The other section I thought was really cool was the Earthquake God returns. And it's mainly because the last sentence, only the narrowest margin in the city saved, Excelsis, so those skirmishes still rage daily amongst the rubble. And it's because we set our narrative Warcry event in Excelsis. I was like, perfect.
Right?
Yeah, right.
They confirm exactly why we said it there.
That's a good point. It didn't even occur to me when I was reading it. But yeah, no, you were justified.
Validated, baby.
Vindication.
You might also want to read Hallowed Ground before your narrative event, though, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like literally just throwing Black Library books on you. But like that's one of the coolest things about this book is it because it is literally now in the timeline, and we've got 2 Black Library books that are specifically here. Like you're just reading through this, and like that was all I was reminded of. Like, oh, that reminds me of this part in the book that I just read about Kragnos. Oh, that reminds me of this part of the book I just read called Hallowed Ground. Right? Like it's super fun to have a book that ties into things that I just read that just got released. Like, yeah, super current. And we've never had that before. It's super engaging to me.
I agree. Anybody else have any other stories that they want to chat about? Or Josh, if you have more, by all means, let me know.
Nope. That was my 2. Thank you.
Cool. He didn't take one of mine.
Boy.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Battle of Amberstone Watch. We had talked about it earlier, but this is the battle that took place in the Dominion box set. And what I love is like this one paragraph of lore quite literally changes the face of Gur and changes the face of Thondia because the Cruel Boys create an area of drowned lands. And so if you look at a map of Thondia before, like that takes place before the Dominion box set, it will look different than the map that exists in this book because the realms are changing because of battles like this.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite maps we've seen so far. Even though all the maps are cool, like this map is awesome.
Yeah.
It is neat. I never actually, well, I don't need to get into it. So on the map, is it where the Moric Hills are? Where is the Drowned Lands?
It doesn't really show it on the map, but yeah, the Moric Hills and Emberstone Watch areas where those battles take place.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. So not as far down as Carcass Downs, right?
No.
Far south?
It's like just above the Carcass Downs. You can almost like see like the greenish arrow path of it.
Okay, cool. Very neat. Well, what I was going to say is I never actually read Amberstone Watch because I didn't think it was going to mean anything, right? I thought that was just going to be the end of it. But now reading this book, it's almost a necessity for me. I mean, not for most people, but so I do have to go back and thumb through it. They're not particularly long.
Yeah. Paven and I played through the Warcry campaign for Dominion, and so that was perfect. It was like, oh, we got the same characters. We know exactly what's happened. It was a lot of fun. Great preparation.
I forgot they did that. That's true. Is it the same named people, like even that are in this story too? Oh, that's great. Man, I'm really missing out. I need to go back.
Yeah, those little books that come in the battle boxes have now become super important, right? Like, so the one that was in the Deepkin and Daughters one, right? Like, who knows what's going to come out of there?
Yeah.
Who knows, like, if anything.
Up until this point, I've been ignoring them because I haven't assumed that, not ignoring them, but like I don't put as much time on them as I would like to. But now they tricked me. GW's got me over the barrel.
It was when they released the Daughters of Cain and the Slanesh one. And then they published that story in the little paragraph that I went, oh, they're actually paying attention to these now. They're not just doing little starter sets.
Very neat, very cool. All right, any other stories in the Age of Sigmar that you want to talk about?
Sigmar. What are you talking about?
All right, because the last one, I feel like whenever I get these timelines, especially with the battle tomes, I always go flip to the very, very last entry in the timeline, because if there is going to be a hint about the future, it's going to be in that last one. It's not so much a hint, but they talk about the era of the beast, right? So this is new era that we're in, and it just mentions that through I guess the awakening of the realms, or the awakening of Ghur specifically, outposts in Ghur are reporting that their residents are becoming more feral, right? And we've already learned through different settings and information about the mortal realms that the people who live in Ghur to begin with are already a little savage is one way to just describe them, I suppose. But they are not even just in their behavior, but in their appearance. Like, folks are starting to become more feral, and so that's one part of it. But then additionally, it mentions that those stormcasts from the Moric Hills and from the Dominion box set, it wasn't enough to have, I guess, quote unquote, stopped the Oryx, the Cruel Boys, from whatever their dastardly plans were. But they are now actually hunting those same Oryx across the landscape, trying to, I don't know, bring them to Sigmar's justice, or however you want to phrase it. So that's the clue right in this timeline, in this history, that story's not done yet. Like, there's more to come. And fortunately, it's in this very book. So
exactly.
Yeah. It was at this point. Well, I'll ask, is there any other Age of Sigmar stories that folks want to talk about?
I mean, yes, but none of them that are listed in this part right now.
Fair. It was at this point, it seemed appropriate to ask a question from, there's this Sever guy. I'm not going to make a dumb joke. I'm just going to say from Will, before I know Will was going to be on the episode. He was asking. But what a great opportunity to ask this question. Hey, Will, you're here. Patron and host of the show. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. Do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, sure. I highlighted it thinking we were just going to delete it, but I'll ask it.
No, it's pertinent.
What's your favorite change to the setting post Kragnos?
All right. Does anybody have any answers that come to mind initially?
That won't spoil the rest of the podcast.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Good point. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, we can definitely come back to it.
We'll plant the seed for the audience to think.
There you go. Perfect. The tree is
the Drowned Lands doesn't spoil the rest of that. That seems cool.
True.
It seems neat.
I mean, that was my answer.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I can't answer my own questions.
Yeah.
Can I just note that this is the first time that, as Aaron always says, you just need to wait around in the Discord server all day, every day, until he shows up and asks questions, right? Like Will did. And then maybe after doing that for years, then maybe if you're still waiting around and waiting for Aaron to show up every day, you might be asked to be on the podcast too, and then you might get to ask your own question. Like, this is a new change. Like, how awesome things can work out.
Fantastic.
You too. Yeah.
If you live in Madison and you bother Aaron all the time, he'll put you on the show.
I feel like I bother you more than you bother me.
There is a section called The Realm of Beasts just before this that I thought was really cool.
All right, tell me about it.
Yeah, so the main thing in this section that kind of caught my interest is it talks about these realm cartographers and what their roles are. And I thought that was super interesting because it talks about being an ancient art and how people, pay them a lot or promise them a lot to help guide them to where they should settle. But he talks about a lot of them tend to be monastic orders, where they're trained to observe the surroundings and commit each rise of land, increase the coast of memory so they can make the maps later. And one of the group's names is absolutely hilarious. The Lords Audacious of the Free Cities. Yeah, it was like, great. Yeah, that's a hilarious name. You're not humble at all.
No.
They're plotting crusade routes and discerning where valuable natural resources may lie. But it was kind of neat to get this, because the realms are changing, especially Ghur, where the continents are always shifting and trying to eat each other. That they have these groups of individuals who, are their jobs are to try to, figure out where everything is and where it's changing. And it even goes on to say, while they have a current map, it will be changing the next, several years or so. So things may not be accurate anymore. So it's just kind of a fun picture in time snapshot. This is my KO Skyport likes to do a little cartography too. It was kind of a fun peak of interest for me.
It's going to be yet another. If you like Realmscape cartography, you should read Lauk of Eye, because one of the characters in there is actually a Realmscape cartographer from Ghur.
Wow.
So which book?
In Lauk of Eye.
That's not
Dynasty of Monsters.
Yeah, there you go, Dynasty of Monsters.
Yeah. Yes, this is my favorite thing about this book. Everything ties in, and it feels like that's in there because Lauk of Eye was made, and so we should put a little thing in there about this character that they invented for that, and that's cool. We should include it, right?
What was the chicken and the egg, or is it vice versa?
Who knows? But it's the integration of the two, right? For a long time, Black Library is this completely independent thing. And we started to see some little things integrated, and now we're getting them super integrated together. And I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you have this book too?
I don't have this book. Sorry.
Okay. I'll find it somewhere.
So it's interesting you talk about the Lords Audacious, because that kind of reminds me, Josh, of the Trade Pioneers, which, if I remember correctly, you played a little bit of the Trade Pioneer in Soulbound. I know it's not exactly the same thing, but it feels like it has the same vibe a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I thought was cool. Mm-hmm. So that's where my mind goes. Any other thoughts about the Realm of Beasts sections, the maps that we're seeing here? We were talking about maps a little bit ago. Any of that stuff jump at you guys?
I was just going to say, I thought it was interesting they attributed characters to the continents. They talk about like Rondel being aggression and the megafauna and being bullish, so they actually give personality to the continents, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah. Have we seen that before? I don't remember seeing that. I can't say that's never been done, but I don't remember
just in
seeing those.
Yeah. They've mentioned like the continents have personalities, but this is the first time they say what the personalities for each continent is.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Okay. Very cool.
The other thing I love about this map is I feel like these arrows that they've put on there are like reading a battle report of what has happened so far in 3.0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of where they have the arrows and what's actually happening. So that's super engaging to me. And so there's an arrow from the bottom of Antor up into the Carcass Dance, right? And that's the book Kragnos. Like that arrow right there is the book Kragnos. And then you have an arrow from the Carcass Dance to Excelsis, and that's Broken Realms Kragnos, right? Like all these arrows are specific stories that at this point we know. And that's awesome.
And it's impossible to talk about this map without talking about the huge tear that has been created as you see Kragnos literally tore the realm apart on his march to Excelsis.
Why would he do that? Come on, Kragnos. It's particularly neat, right? So like the evolution of that we're seeing this map, I don't know, not in real time, but over time at the very least is fantastic.
Yeah.
I remember at the beginning of Age of Sigmar, right? That people were bemoaning the fact that either A, there weren't enough maps, or B, the maps that we had weren't particularly good. I think they of the many things that they took to heart through the evolution of Age of Sigmar, their mapping has they really took those complaints to heart and delivered, I think, completely on what people want to what they want to see in their maps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, even just the character of this, realm, with all the spiky claws and teeth and whatever, it's just amazing. It's great.
So,
Yeah.
Will, I want you to mention your little discovery.
So
Yeah.
it's actually not as cool of a discovery as I thought it was.
Why?
But like
I'll be the judge of that.
like we have the Crown Spine range, and then at the very tippity top, or I guess the bottom on the map, there's the Crown Skull. Like there's the actual skull of it there. So when we get to the story and we talk about what the Crown Spine Incarnate is, it literally looks like the area of Gur.
Sorry, maybe I don't understand what you mean. What do you mean? It looks like the area of Gur.
So, like, if you're looking at the map, like you've got the skull and it wraps around, and the model from the Incarnate is the same skull,
Similar, yeah.
and it wraps
So, like,
around in the same way.
I see.
like the crown skull's the base of the tail, and you follow the mountain range around to the skull. It looks like one of the Incarnates.
Oh, okay.
Or
Gotcha.
in reverse, the Crown Skull is the skull of the Incarnate.
I had it the other way, where the lake was the skull of the Incarnate. Lake
Because the skull looks like a lake. Yeah.
yeah.
Or lake looks like a skull, but it doesn't. The crown skull literally has a skull, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
could be either way.
Yep. Skull.
Yep, it sure does. Yep.
Which could
Forwards
be
and
the
backwards,
skull.
backwards and forwards. It's Ouroboros.
It's just yet another way that they're hiding cool things in the maps. But then the stone nautilor makes me wonder what that is, because that just looks like a massive snail.
It looks like a giant shell. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder what that could
And of course, I love the footprints of Gorkamorka. That's always
Yeah.
been fun. Yeah.
Right on. Well, we're talking about landmarks on this map. Maybe we put a pin in that Beast Awakens section and let's talk about, so that it does spend some time highlighting landmarks here in Thondia. And it sounds like we're already touching on some of our favorites that we're seeing on the map. Did you guys have any favorites in the description that you wanted to chat about, or not in the description, in the body of the deep dive into Thondia that you guys wanted to share with the listeners?
I'll just mention the Drowned Lands again. I think it was a really cool origin story. Because having read the Dominion box, having played those scenarios, and then having this actual swampy, massive land be there due to that and affecting the game, in the map forevermore, was really cool. And that was kind of a neat thing to see them add. I didn't realize they were going to do that. So it was kind of cool.
And hold up, forevermore. Let's see if Sigmar has something to say about it. I mean, maybe we can do some cleanup after the fact. But before we get too far away, we were just talking about the Crown Spine range. I feel like maybe we should talk about it now while it's still fresh. So listeners who can't actually see the map, there's this curling range of mountains, and it emulates, or maybe was literally this god beast that existed in Thondia called Krond, who it was described as a mixture of a wolf and a serpent, which is a brand new thing that I've never heard of before. I can't even imagine what that might look like. Well, I can, because
it had like a wolf head.
That looks like it. Yeah. So there's this mountain range. There were tribes of humans who were fleeing chaos. We were talking about that a little bit before in the Age of Chaos, and they fled up into this mountain range to escape chaos. But in doing so, chaos sort of pursued them up into the mountains, killed a lot of people, and thus left this mountain range also haunted, and it's now crawling with undead as well. And I thought, oh man, this mountain range is got a lot of themes going on. It's there's a lot of moving parts to this crown-spined range. You've got humans, tribal humans fleeing chaos, the introduction of undead, like who's in control. Like it's really all over the place. But in some ways, I think it makes it particularly neat in that all these different, I don't know, it's not even necessarily warring factions, but the realm of beasts caters to all types of savagery, regardless of who you are and what gods you serve. And so it seemed to me that the Crownspine range was emblematic of that. And it'll maybe become important a little bit later when we talk more about what Gur has to say about the happenings in the mortal realms. But we'll get there. Any other landmarks, which is the word I couldn't remember before, folks want to talk about?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Carcass Dons, unless that's also stealing from Josh.
No, go for it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so the Carcass Dons is where Kragnos is originally from, and it highlights the fact that all of Gur is predatory, to the fact that Thondia itself essentially ate this other continent, which is something we had technically known about from like other books. But here it's showing that people are still living there. People are still fighting. They're fighting over the relics of like Kragnos' former empire. And it just leaves us with that last little tidbit of perhaps Don's is not as dead as we had once thought. And I just want to see if anything happens from that.
Very well could, no doubt.
Especially since it seems to have more of these, the Kron spine.
Incarnates.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Apparently it has more Kron spine incarnates than anywhere else.
Yeah.
Interesting. Paul, did you have a landmark or region that you wanted to chat about?
Crawling pits of Grantia.
Yeah, I was going to pick that one, but I'm like, I'm not going to. So Paul wants.
Yeah. That's why I left the jungles for Phil too.
Yeah, I was just going to say that literally we had the same thought. Those are the two things I was leaving alone. Yeah.
It's basically just this massive canyon haunted by spider fang, which of course I love anyway. But now Gordrak has gone there and he's managed to contain a god beast within the webbing. And so now he's created a permanent way to get into the 8 points. And apparently has, as of the latest White Dwarf, also has made a beachhead in the 8 points and is sending out Iron Jaws to go and like mess up stuff. So
Just messing it up.
yeah, who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love a bunch of orcs just running crazy, messing stuff up?
I don't want to meet the person who doesn't love it. I love the parallels that Destruction is getting to what Death has done already, right? Like, so
Sure.
Nagash with the Bone Reapers has secured his beachhead into the 8 points. And in the same way, Gordrak with, the Iron Jaws of his has done the same. And similarly, how there was the Necroquake leading to, realm reaching effects in the world. And now there's this admittedly lifequake, but like then it seems to be waking up the realm of beasts. And so there's a lot of parallels. You can kind of see that they're, I don't want to say repeating because that has maybe a negative connotation, but they're second verse same as the first kind of situation, which I'm all for. I love patterns. I love seeing things like this play out in different realms and seeing how the different realms sort of react to these larger events. So I think this is very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only other section I was going to mention is related to a question by Thundercake. Tell me the lore relating to the cities in it. And the book goes through the three main cities that we're aware of. Excelsis, of course, which is the largest of the cities and has the Spear of Malice next to it, where they mine prophecies. They do mention two other cities, Bilgeport, which is essentially a pirate city, so it's not regulated by any sort of normal authority. But the pirates are hired to do a lot of the work for Excelsis, and so they're left kind of alone. And Isoland, which is a fun port that's which was interesting because on this map it's not on the coast, which I thought it was on the coast because there's supposed to be a port there. So maybe they just kind of moved it out over a bit.
Yeah, I think it's in like a deep cove.
Right,
but
it's nowhere near the coast in this particular picture.
You can almost see like where it should be. Like there's a circle where it should be.
Right, exactly. That's what I think. When the ice fangs, it should be like in that little cove there, but it's not. But it's interesting because it's a city that has what they call the Everflame, this magical flame around it that helps keep things away, but also keeps the city warmer than the land around it. And they do a lot of trading in terms of Arctic animals and other things like that. And Isoland and the Bilgeport were featured in some of the Black Library books, which is kind of fun to read about. I can't remember the name of them.
Yeah, so those were in the Horthiverse, as I affectionately call them, books.
Yes.
So I think
Silver
was Silver Shard. And it might have just been only that one, perhaps.
No, it was the standalone one with the pirate elf. I can't remember her name though.
Oh, did she go back there in Heart of Winter?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay. She's in Bilgeport and in Isoland. Yeah. So.
Gotcha. Yep. So I imagine those got brought through because Nick Horth was writing about them in his Black Library stories. So it's again great to see those yet again in the in a different context, right? Not just in the Black Library side, as Paul was saying, but on the studio side too. So Thundercake, that sort of answers your question. I don't know that it goes too much more anymore. I don't know there's too much more city lore in the book, but maybe we'll find some more as we dig through. We'll see what else there is. All right, cool. Any other landmarks that you folks want to chat about because maybe I'll ask some more listener questions. We've broken the seal, so to speak. Now let's keep them coming. I got a question from a new patron. In fact, just earlier today, Dog Tired. They ask, is this more effective at doing actual world building and making Thondia into a place where real people live? I thought this was a good time to ask it, right? We're talking about the place. We're talking about the setting. Is it doing a good job of making it into a place where real people live? What do you guys think?
I think the book overall, yeah. And I think, especially as you get through some of the stories, and how they describe at least these three particular cities, and specifically where a lot of them tend to be along the coasts. But later they do talk about a lot of the Dawn Crusades, and establishing outposts and what those kind of look like. So I definitely think it's interesting to see how people could live there and why.
Agreed. Like, even before we get into like the main story proper, we've already talked about the hunters and gatherers, the people who lived in caves, the realm cartographers, and like all the different ways people can live in this area.
Yeah, agreed. Paul, what do you think?
I think the Black Library books, to me, really solidify the setting better than this book, just because they're so much longer and they give you a person view, right? Whereas we're getting kind of like an omniscient view when we're reading this battle tome. And so for me, like, those do a lot of the world building. This does a lot of world building too, but because those are already there, as you heard me talk about, I'm pulling out stuff from the books that this book is reiterating. So it is effective at doing actual world building. But for me, because I've read these other books, it's also pulling in those. And so it's adding even more depth in addition to what I've already read in Black Library, because it's pulling those out all together and making them exist in the same place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, again, it's one of my favorite things about this book is that it does draw everything in and it connects everything, because we do have this connection between Black Library and the studio now. So I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it to me, it's a really big deal. We just haven't seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
It's like world confirming in some ways, right? It's not world building per se. The world is being built in a bunch of different places, and this is confirming and evolving what we may have seen elsewhere, which is nice.
I think we have more world building as we get into like the actual meat of the story. So far, we've gotten into like, this is what this is, but when we actually get into the story itself, we're going to have some good world building in there for sure.
Interesting. I'm surprised, and I might cut this out. I'm surprised. I'm getting that impression from most of you. Like, all you've all said in different ways that it's more of the world building was coming later. For some reason, I felt like this was more the world building section of the book. But it sounds like you guys were getting a lot of world building down the line, which I'm interested to hear your reactions to the story proper. So, anyways, that's just Aaron's aside. A related question, I think, comes from Kelborn. And they ask, is Thondia a good base due to it having a bestiary and so on, to start fleshing out your own niche of Ghur, for example, for a homebrew free city or an entire new minor faction within the realm? So I'm not the homebrew guy, so I'll ask the homebrew people here. Does this give you a foundation to build off of for your own type of homebrew stuff that maybe mulling around in your noggin? What do you think about that? How does this relate to the homebrew side of your brain?
I will say yes, in the sense that like I unfortunately haven't had to do much different. Like, as Josh mentioned earlier, there's a Hungering Step campaign that I am running, or at this point have run online, and I have this vision of all these cool things I wanted to do in Ghur, and this book like made all of those things real. Mm-hmm. So in the sense, like, everything I thought I was homebrewing turns out Phil Kelly is a mind reader, and it is Ghurish lore. So the creativity that you can come up with in the Land of Beasts is certainly there, and this book, like Kelborn mentions, the bestiary just expands on that.
Yeah, to add on to that, anytime you have a really good map, to me, that makes it real fun to be able to make a homebrew free city or something like that, because you can see where everything is, but you can also see where everything isn't. And especially because we have these breakouts of like the Gnarlwood. What is the Gnarlwood? the crawling pits of Garantia. What is that, right? You get identities of different physical places, and you can kind of place your city near that, and then you have an immediate thing to fight against, right? Or thing that defines how this culture has evolved. And that's that's cool.
Yeah, I agree. And to go even deeper into that, I think the fact that they give certain continents, or not really continents, regions of Gur personalities, totally could feed into, okay, I live in this area of Gur. How does it usually behave? I can design my city around that as well. And I think the fact that, the recent White Dwarfs have come out with campaigns and rules and sets for Warcry in Gur, and then we've got the Path of Glory system in here that talk about outposts and other really interesting things about Gur. I think there's a lot of information recently to kind of help you frame all sorts of really in-depth information for establishing, your army, your outpost, your free city in Gur.
Yeah, absolutely. What Paul was saying before reminded me that a good map is kind of like jazz. It's all about the landmarks you don't place on it.
Yep.
Right.
Wrap your minds around that, guys. All right. So there's some questions, or there's some listener questions. We talked about some landmarks that we really enjoyed. Is there any more stuff we want to talk about on sort of the setting side, or like the deep dive into Thondia that you guys want to chat about before we dive into the story, which is more of sort of the second half of the lore in this here book?
Maybe just mention that they do talk about the jungles of Meketspar.
Okay. You can pretend to be Phil here.
Yeah. And I mainly bring it up because, throughout the book, they also talk about certain types of creatures, which tend to be, dinosaurs, of course, carnosaurs, etc., that live in this region. And this is where a lot of the Seraphon are. And a lot of the unique creatures and fauna live in this particular area. It's kind of referenced a few times throughout the book. So just wanted to make sure people were aware. It's a very highly populated jungle of more feral type Seraphon.
Hey, Josh, if you want to know more about the jungles of Meketspar, you should read Kragnos, because there's a free city in there as well.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that. Well, shoot, that should go back to Thundercake's question then.
Sure. Oh, yeah, the city of Akar.
Yep.
Well,
Huh?
I mean, I could say more, but I don't want to spoil Kragnos.
No.
Kragnos.
I got to read this book. Here,
cut this out. There's no reason to think that it doesn't exist after Kragnos. Like it can be remade. And but don't we figure out that like a city isn't necessarily always a place, but it's the people.
It's the people.
It's the hearts and minds that populate it.
Unless they were also trampled.
Yeah, like it's the joke from Thor Ragnarok. Like the foundations are sturdy,
right?
And then Kragnos stamples the foundations. Well,
right.
It's too true. All right.
I honestly thought Paul was going to say La Kavai again.
No,
like this book has everything.
No,
what was that book? Well, I feel like I
just read those 3 books in the last month. It's like,
right.
They're super fresh in my mind. And that,
right.
Literally, that's probably why it's not world building as much to me, because I literally read in great detail chapters and chapters about all of these different places. So
sure,
yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, folks, let's hop into the story part of this here book, which is nice, right? It's kind of a campaign book. It's kind of like a setting. What do they call them in D&D? Like a
source book.
Setting.
It was a setting book, or
like a setting book, source book. But they went to the trouble of including a nice little, tidy little story in here as well that we can follow along with. So I'll ask: does anybody want to kick us off? Does someone want to intro what we're reading about here and how the story starts? First come, first serve.
So functionally, when we talked about directly after Dominion, this is exactly what we're talking about. The story takes place immediately after Amberstone Watch, and the first words in the actual proper text are Amberstone Watch would never fully heal, right? And then it talks about the Lord Imperator to the Herms of Sigmar, and it kind of follows them through the story of dealing with like this new threat, and that the realms are poisoned now, but it wasn't completely successful. So like it gives you a recap of what happened in Dominion, right? And then starts to move on with like, how do you, like, if you're talking about how do you survive, how do people like live in Gur, like this to me, these first few paragraphs are a great way of like talking about being in Gur and being like, well, it's a great, terrible thing happened. All right, now we move on. Like there was not much we could do about it, but it's happening now. And so how do we deal with the fact that this thing is happening, right? And it just adds a little bit more little details, like little outposts that, oh, this one might be a problem. This one, like, which is, again, goes back to a couple of the other Black Library stories that we've read. And it just kind of gives us a real, I don't know, examination of what happened after the battle, but also where we are now and how we're moving forward. Because functionally, what the story does is it takes us from the city where Amberstone Watch is, right, and the events of that, and it takes us off into the wilds of Gur, specifically Thondia, because there's something happening, and everybody can tell that something's happening, right?
Yeah, and like to your point of like doing a good job of painting the picture of like moving forward from like tragedy. I almost said tragedy, combining tragedy and travesty.
TM.
I did it on purpose. It mentions that like the original settlers of Amberstone Watch are no longer with us. R.I.P. The people who are there now are from Excelsis, and they're from Excelsis because their homes there were destroyed. It points out that like if you are in Gur and if you are in one of these new Dawnbringer settlements, you're not there because your life is good. You're there because your life in a protected city is bad enough that you're going to go risk it out in the wilds, which I think does a lot of world building for me of like what Gur is really like and how brutal it really is for these people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that it's a Dawnbringer crusade that's failed, but they won't let it fail.
Yep.
Right. Like everybody who is there is wiped out. And we'll just find more people. We'll bring them out because, you know, it's not going to be this amazing, fantastic thing, but it's going to survive. And that's the important thing, is that something survives.
The foundations are sinking, but we will still build on it.
Yeah, agreed. So I guess this story spends a little bit of time, right? In like we mentioned, spends some time in Amber. Oh God, what Stone is Watch. Amberstone Watch? I was going to Amber Bone because I was reading about bone splitters. Amberstone Watch, and it talks about it's their Lord and Parentant, right? It's presumably the same guy from the previous stories, and he's you know, watching them rebuild and re-erect a statue, I think of Indrasta, I believe. And a crowd, a roar goes up from the crowd. Everybody's, celebrating this icon that they now have, this sort of savior of the Amberstone Watch. And he's a little bit despondent, just sort of seeing the destruction, despite, this maybe is could be considered a joyous time. And he reflects on the idea that, he's known Yndrasta for a while, and he's come to the conclusion that she's changing, and she's, becoming more reserved and isolated, and I guess vague is a term that he uses as well, because they start chatting at some point, and she says, hey man, hey buddy. No, she doesn't say it like that, but she calls his attention to hey, we're getting these reports in the region of these strange occurrences out there. I think Paul was mentioning it. We need to do something about this. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, we don't even know the details. We don't know if there's, a common thread. But she's like, no, we have to act now because we're going to regret it if we don't. So she gives him this vague instruction that we're going to go on the hunt again. And he's like, well, I guess, right? Like, as if you were some sort of sidekick in like a buddy comedy.
She's his queen.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, he's less than a sidekick. He's a servant in some ways, right? This powerful, important Lord Imperatant is still at the beck and call of this
Prime Huntress.
Yeah, Prime Huntress, exactly. But he says, all right, fine. I guess we're back at it again. And they're putting together a team, which is to say they're assembling what Stormcast forces they still have of their what is their Stormhost, the Lions of something, or
Auric Lions.
Yeah, Auric Lions. There it is.
And there's another group there too. I can't remember the name of their Stormhost.
So they there's no rest for the wicked. They can't hang back and maybe defend this settlement, but instead they need to go out. They need to strike out, and there's a new hunt, which I think we were talking about before. In some ways, it's a hunt after these Aurics, but it's more than that. They're after something I don't know, more not devious, because devious isn't even the word, but maybe more dangerous out there.
Yep.
So I have a question for you, Aaron.
Please do.
So you did a Pocket Realm story on the book, or the short story Monsters.
I did.
Right? So
Loved
would
it.
you say that happens after Dominion, but before Thondia?
I would maybe even say I wouldn't be surprised if it was before Dominion, or if it is out of a timeline entirely and it has no bearing one way or the other. I don't think she's reserved or like isolated in that story per se, or particularly so. And so I imagine I think it would happen before this, but it could just be another author's interpretation of what Indrasta is as well. So
Fair.
I don't know. Short answer.
Yeah. But if you want to hear about that story, you listen to those Pocket Realms.
Yeah, listen to Pocket Realms Monstered by Noah Van Wyn. It was an awesome short story, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, super good. But it kind of explains really well how her character deals with other people, right? Which is one of the points of this first little section, is that she is this like kind of unfeeling commander, and that something is going on, but she feels a purpose and a need to be able to perform what the job is, right? So
yeah, true.
And then we kind of move on to the next one, and the next one we have a complete change of perspective. When we get to the Call of the Beast, we actually switch to the Cruel Boys half of the Dominion box set. So here we're figuring out that they know that something is happening as well, right? And it was great to read these two and have both characters come back and to have this narrative tie in together. Mm-hmm. And he knows where he's going, right? Like he's like, the Kronspine Range is where we are going. And they meet up with this group of bone splitters. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Josh, you talk about it.
Oh, no, I was just saying, yeah, they meet up with the Bone Splitters and then Beasts of Chaos, which are all drawn by the primal power of Gur to this particular location. You know, they don't necessarily know why. They just know, the heartbeat of Gur, the great stomping, is getting louder and heavier, and it's drawing them to this place. And it's hilarious because they start fighting, and then their magical dueling awakens an incarnate of a small power level, and it essentially blows up. And then they're like, we're kind of on the same side in this. How about we work together?
Which is just such a great moment, right? Because how many times have we had the conversation about, specifically, why aren't beastmen destruction? Or how do you determine whether something is a chaos thing versus a destruction thing, right? And it's hard to sometimes justify or wrap your mind around the fact that, like, you've literally got beast men, but they aren't the ones who worship the god of beasts, right? In
right.
The mortal realms, and how does that jive? And in this story, like, the two sides realize they've got more in common than they don't, and are willing to work together. So it seemed natural, right? It seemed like peanut butter and jelly. They should have been working together this whole time, or as closely together as two factions of things that like to destroy things can, work together.
Right.
Even two groups of orcs don't necessarily always work together. But this, it didn't seem unnatural to me. It seemed like it worked. And maybe that was, ideally, that was the goal, I suppose, of this part of the story anyways. How did you guys react to this joining of two nominally disparate factions?
But no, I thought it was interesting because they both talk about, they have different reasons for wanting Gur to awaken and show civilization, what it's really like, so they come from different perspectives, but they agree the fact that Gur is awakening, and they both agree that this is a good thing, for us, not so much for our enemies. And so at that point they decide, we'll work together to ensure that this incarnate does its thing. And I read in some other books and some other places where it talks about the effect that Gur, the primal, anger, the feralness that can affect a lot of the civilized folk have. While it does have purchase on the civilizations in Gur, like the Oryx and the ogres, they can feel it. It generates the Wa, makes them more aggressive, but it doesn't affect them in the same way because they're already more attunely connected to the primal energies of Gur. And I thought that was always an interesting, comparison. That they're already, savage and feral, so it doesn't affect them quite the same way. They don't transform into beasts.
I just love that we have these characters continuing on. Like we obviously talked about the Dominion box set, but then we have the Beastmen, Bray Shaman, Gorg, and Kai, who briefly appears in the prologue to Broken Realms Kragnos. He's the dude who couldn't stop the Rite of Life. So it's kind of his fault this all is happening in a way.
Sure, he's the Manfred of the Lifequake.
Yeah, exactly. And it just shows we're getting more personalities and more characters for a faction that people hasn't had this for a while in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he also in the Broken Realms? Did the short story, some of the short stories before?
So.
I think he had his own too.
I've been quiet because I've been trying to figure that out.
It's Broken Realms, The Turnskin's Tale. So it's one he tells a story to somebody. It's from his perspective, if I remember correctly. And he talks about how I think he became a beastman. He wasn't born that way.
Yep.
But he also talks about how, and it's not spoilers because we're talking about the story here, that he is in the service of the Shadowgave, who I don't know enough about old school lore, but this is a thing. This is something that's existed before these stories here, if I remember correctly, and that it's a stand-in for their Beastman god, or if somebody who knows more about it, maybe bring it up.
Yeah, it's from the world that was the same god, I believe, is the Beastman. He wants dissolution of everything to be destroyed.
Yeah.
He wasn't a god in the old world. He was a leader.
Okay.
Yeah, sweet model. That's awesome.
And he, for those of you that play the Total War Warhammer games, he's one of the legendary lords you can play as.
Oh, cool.
Gotcha.
Interesting. Yeah, I just know enough to recognize the name and not really know anything about him. But so I'm glad it. I know it bugs some people when they bring too many old world stuff, and honestly, sometimes it bugs me. But I'm for it here. Honestly, the Beastmen can get as much love as they can. I'm willing to throw it whatever love they need. And so, by all means, bring in their interesting characters that they may have. All right, neat. So orcs and beastmen, dogs and cats working together. As they make their way towards they climb further into the Kronspire range, where they know that something's afoot, and they're going to figure out what. They're drawn to it sort of supernaturally. All right, I know they talk about the Kronspine incarnate next, but let's put a pin in that and keep moving with the story here.
So that throughout the book, and even a little bit earlier, they talk about the Beastmen getting reinforced by mortals, which have started to transform into more werebeasts type things. And earlier on, in one of the other sections, they had little snippets of lore from different groups talking. Some was from Skaven, there was one snippet from Lumineth that talks about this where behavior just changing, and they call it the curse of Kadon. Are any of you familiar with does that reference anything historically, or is that
Kadon was a sorcerer in not in Age of Sigmar, but in Warhammer's Fantasy. There was a magic book, and there was a spell where Kadon I believe he summoned monsters. So it was a spell called Kadon something or other.
Yeah, there was a lore of beasts spell. What was it?
It was lore of beasts.
Yeah, wouldn't it transform someone into a monster? Isn't that what the spell did? I can't remember.
But
transformation of Kadon, possibly.
Yep. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it felt like it had a reference, but I wasn't familiar with it, so that's why I was kind of.
And if you want to see it in action, read Kragnos' Avatar of Destruction, because one of the what is the color of Gur magic? It's not an amber wizard, is it? Amber?
It is.
Amber. Yeah.
So one of the amber wizards. I don't think this is a spoiler to say one of the amber wizards in Kragnos casts. I think it even calls it out. It calls it the transformation of Kadan and transforms some of his allies into these beasts.
Gotcha.
Pretty cool.
Gotcha.
Sorry, audience.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you
for bringing up all these books. All right, so we leave the destruction forces perspective. We hop back to the forces of order. What have they been up to? Where do they go? What do they do? Who's their daddy and what do they do?
We have the forces of order like on the march, on the hunt for this thing, and I really like this section because it shows Vorst, who is a Stormcast, who knows like what other Stormcasts are obviously going through, but he still snaps at the fact like Andrasta is so cold and silent. Like it's showing like the cost of reforging not just to us mortals, but to like it's really annoying the other Stormcast when someone's gone too far. And like this is someone that he knew when they like before they were both Stormcast, which I really enjoy, like having that relationship.
I wonder how often that happens where you get like reforged with people that you knew in your past life. Does it happen all the time and people just don't realize it because their memories have been wiped? Or like does Sigmar try to keep, friends together so that like because they work well together? I wonder.
Well, I mean, like all the Auric Lions come from Gur, so they may very well know. Well, in this case, they do know each other. A lot of them do, but a lot of the other storm hosts also come from the realm in which they work. So it's not unlikely that they might have known each other.
So the real friends were the friends that you made along the way.
Sure, we're the friends that you'd already made along the way.
And again,
guys, so we've got some like destruction focused Stormcast, right? Like that are from the realm of Gur. And they're called the Auric Lions.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if
Auric, yeah,
they're are they reincarnated Aurics? Is that a possibility? Right? Like
I strongly doubt it.
That's a strong doubt.
Fair, but like obviously that was an intentional thing. You take the destruction faction Stormcast, right, kind of theme thing, and you call them the Auric somethings, but you spell it differently.
Obviously,
it's Auric as in gold.
Well, I know
Gold.
that. I know that. That's what the word
Okay. I just didn't know if you knew or not.
But if you say it out loud, it sounds like
It's true,
right?
Yeah.
So we hop back into the perspective of the Stormcast, and they I believe they come across like this outpost that's under attack from, I guess, different orcs, right? We're already following some orcs, but these are different orcs that are attacking the place. Yeah. And they say this simply will not do. And they charge in and try to come to the rescue of this outpost. They save the day. The orcs are driven off, and they realize that the residents of this outpost are suffering from some of that bestial transformation, right? Am I remembering this correctly?
Yep.
And that because they have this proximity to this Kronspire
Incarnate.
Range. Well, the Incarnate, as we know, but I don't know that they know this quite yet. There's some transformative property that the outpost is nearby, and this place is in danger if it's not, if it's not beaten, if it's not conquered, if it's not resolved, if they don't do something, these folks are going to, succumb to their feral nature. And so they use this as sort of a launching point, or, gives them purpose to then pursue further this warping, transformative thing that they need to hunt down and defeat, they assume. Did that sum up the section? Do you guys have anything to add or anything jump out at you in this part of the story?
Yeah. So one other thing to add is before they got to the outpost, that they do highlight that how fierce the beasts and fauna are currently while they're trying to migrate to this direction. They said about a third of their number are lost just to rampaging beasts that just running them over and other sorts of attacks. From aurochs and other creatures. That they're just constantly being attacked. The aggression level is much higher than it usually is.
One other thing I didn't that stood out to me is this: they were talking to the leader of the outpost, and he's covered in crocodilian scales. It's not just fur, but it's a wide range of bestial transformations. Which I can't wait to see crocodile beastmen models. Make it happen. everybody who isn't me. We're getting closer, guys. We're so very, very close. The two perspectives soon shall join.
Worlds colliding.
Worlds colliding in violence, which is the best way to collide. So the Stormcast are led up into this, sort of the foothills and then the mountains of this Crownspire range. The villagers, or however you want to, the transformed villagers will only lead them so far because they're a little afraid to go any farther. And it's almost as soon as they reach this range that the Stormcast are beset from every cave and crevice of this mountain range. They're attacked by
the combination of the beastmen and the oryx.
Yeah, so they had left behind sort of the numbers were such that they were able to attack and also sort of climb deeper into the mountain range as well. And finally, the battle is joined, the Stormcast versus this weird alliance of destruction themed or leaning factions. And it's sort of a running race, right? Like the Stormcast have to fight through this quote unquote defense that the orcs and beastmen have set up to reach this peak that they need to get to, because they know that's where their quarry lays. Where do we go from here? Does anything else you guys want to add?
The sacrifice of the faction holding back the enemy while the faster elements can rush forward to stop the main threat.
I really like that. Like, it gave us some almost closure to the relationship between the two leaders from the Dominion box set. Like, we see Brakagok, which is such a fun name to say.
Yeah.
Like talking to the Lord Imperator in the aftermath of this battle and just taunting him because he's a cruel boy. That's what he do.
Yep.
Cruel boys do what cruel boys do.
And stabbing him in the mouth. Yeah.
I do like that it's only when they fight that the Lord Imperator can recognize Yndrasta for who she is. Right? Like, he sees memories of her as a mortal chieftain when she fights. And so, like, that's when he realizes that this is what it was all for, right? Like, they start out being super tired and like they've just fought this battle, but finally when they're actually fighting, when they're actually, actively working towards their purpose, then he starts to actually feel that loyalty and feel that devotion again to who she is. And I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, agreed. That makes sense. So like you guys were saying, the Stormcast faction sort of split up a little bit. The Auric Lions, their slow, sturdier elements are left behind to sort of protect the rear, while the faster Stormcast again ascend up this peak to get to their their final goal. There's the fight between the Lions and the Dominion box. The Apparitant goes down, and Brakagok decides that they're going to, teach the humans a lesson. The guides,
the outpost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they kind of leave. If I understand correctly, so they're leaving the battlefield, right? Like they've done what they were sent here to do, and they're going to head back down and cause as much mayhem as they, I guess mayhem's not even necessarily the word, as much pain as they can. And it seems like there's easier pickings down the mountainside, while Yndrasta and her faster Stormcast elements are advancing on the peak. What happens next, my friends? Tell me about it.
They finally come into the cool new model that's in the book, but they come through the pass, and Yndrasta sees this like new thing, completely unperceived and unimagined creature. It says creature does not do it justice, right? But like, just imagine a hurricane, basically, that manifests from Realm Stone with a personality, and like it's fun to read about characters in Age of Sigmar discovering something new without it being actively destroying them. And so to have her standing there and watching what's going on and seeing what this is, and then realizing that this is a thing that is a problem and that she has been seeking for, but then as she's like, finally, all right, this is it. This is what we need to do. Then her stormcasts start being affected by Gur. And the most, so the worst affected drop to a loping crouch, tossing aside weapons to tear with their own hands, which is like a very brutal way of devolving, right? For these stormcasts, these immortal warriors, like that's actually something that's relatively scary just to think of. Like, if this is not taken care of, I've just created immortal feral beasts by bringing them here.
One of the interesting things I thought about this section is, obviously it says, oh yeah, stormcasts can be affected as well, but that the different storm hosts mutated or changed in specific ways. So like the Astral Lions started to sprout white manes, and then the Hammers of Sigmar had draconic voices and broke out in scaly mutations. So there's somehow these different storm hosts have certain bestial traits associated with them already. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think about this culmination of the story?
I really liked it. We had kind of mentioned it before, but like felt like a black library retelling of a fight, like really getting into the nitty gritty. And it also did a good job of like just the picture of Andrasta and the Grandspine showing just how truly massive these things are, because she's got her wings spread out tall. She's standing on these heightened stairs. It even looks like her base is elevated, and it still towers over her. Just showing like how truly powerful these incarnates are going to be in the lore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and this particular section also kind of talks about the amber glow in the orc's eyes. The bone split his eyes. The shaman who's taking control of it. So it's right here. It's kind of the preview to, oh yeah, your characters can control this thing. It's connected. It's directing where it's attacking. So it's kind of see that in a story element before you actually get to the rules. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, agreed. So the scene is set. The Stormcaster is just as bestial as the orcs that they're fighting. The shaman is standing and gaining control of this incarnate, casting spells. It looks like this Stormcaster kind of on the back foot. But I believe, so Andrasta is injured, but what she does here what she does best is she takes her spear and she throws it, because that's what her spear is made for. It's the sister spear of Galmaraz, of Sigmar's hammer. And so the shaman's dancing around in front of the incarnate doing his weird auric dance. But the spear catches him in the chest. It pierces him straight on through, and the tip sticks out his back, and it sort of knocks him backwards into the incarnate, if I'm reading this correctly. And the tip of the spear connects with the amber stone core of this swirling bone giant incarnate, and in doing so, it what does it say, that the holy spear pulled all of its tempestuous might, the soul of an Azurite storm matched against the wild range of Gur. The cosmic forces ward, but then there's a big all explosion. Andrasta protects herself with her wing as this an etheric wind storm kicks up, and the creature is destroyed. It comes apart in a howling, blinding explosion. Mm-hmm. So apparently, guys, on the battlefield, all you got to do, throw a spear at it. That's its one weakness.
the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, right.
The Marauder Horsemen are awesome. Arrows are terrible. That's what I'm hearing.
Hard counter to Incarnates, Marauder Horsemen. So that settles that. All in a day's work. So how do we feel about the resolution? Anything jump out at you guys? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I enjoyed the fact that they made the Stormcast, so feral and primitive, and that at the end of the fight, they kind of recover, and they feel ashamed, and they couldn't control themselves, so very human type responses that you would necessarily associate with them, and there's some cool follow up stories which I'm sure we'll get to as well, but it was an interesting fight because it certainly showed her in a losing situation until she had that prime opportunity to throw the spear and take down two birds with one stone, so to speak.
It's one way to phrase it. Two birds, one spear.
Yep.
What do you other guys think?
I enjoyed the story for sure. It's hard. I think part of me was like, why am I having a hard time retelling the story? It's because there's a lot of fighting, and I don't particularly enjoy being like, and then they did this, and then they did this, right? Like, it's well written enough that it feels poor to try and talk about each aspect of the fight. But I like that it kind of played out the way that would kind of make sense in a game. So that was enjoyable for me. That it felt real to life. And I don't know. I liked the story. I liked that it was a short story, but the conclusion felt satisfying to me, and it felt engaging from the beginning to the end. So I appreciated that a lot.
Well, I'll tell you what, if the fighting got repetitive or less engaging for you, I've got an idea of what might have fixed it, which was this sort of they don't call it an epilogue or an outro, but it kind of feels like that to the story. Some great not bookends, but final parting scenes that I think really piqued my interest. Does anybody want to talk about what happens next?
I'll do it. So
Yeah, you will.
I am will. So we have to what Josh was saying, like the Stormcast are like truly exhausted. This Ghurish energy that was fueling not only the Oryx and the Beasts of Chaos, but also the Stormcast themselves is sort of gone. And you get that, well, how do you pronounce it? Denouement as we start coming down from that high. And you even see Andrasta break just a little as she sees the saddest thing of Ironbeak, the Griffhound, wandering around looking for his Lord Imperatant who didn't survive. It's like, oh, I'm glad Ironbeak is okay, but now I'm sad.
I was having a good time before you brought that up, Will, and now
Yeah, I'm
I
sorry.
don't know that I am.
But what might raise your spirits a little bit is we have the appearance of the elder Draconith Karazai, the Scarred Prince, who shows up after all the fighting is done, which is so unusual for him since he loves fighting. And he has a nice little chat with Andrasta, letting her know what's up for the future.
Yeah. I mean, he gives the little look. I mean, I don't know why he's being so cryptic. Like, you can just tell us what you know, guy. But basically, he's like, she's like, all right, well, at least we killed this thing. Problem solved. And he chuckles to himself. He's like, oh, if you think this problem is solved, I got another thing for you. And her response is like, well, at least it won't be boring, which also seems like that doesn't seem like a Andrasta comment to me, but maybe I don't know her that well. But so, like, it's the two of them talking, like, past each other, and I don't know if they're saying all that much important, but at the very least we can all agree on that there will be more green skins to kill, and they can find common ground on that front.
Yeah, he's got some interesting comments, especially like he's very pessimistic. Our last days will be dawn in a storm of savagery. So he certainly thinks like these events are precipitating, he says all the realms are waking up. This is only the beginning, essentially. So from Thondia to the Spiral Crux, everything. Beast will hold dominion.
Yeah, that one was fine. I don't know why they needed to bring in the dragon, but so be it. It's fun sometimes it's just fun to see names that you recognize. But the more interesting one to me is the I guess the ramifications on the Beastmen side, right? So the Bray Shaman,
Oregon,
has survived, right? He was hiding in some like hidden crag, and he was basically just watching the whole fight, right? Because it was the battle mostly between the Stormcast and the Orcs at this point. After his paltry. His sacrificial beastmen, were put up a little bit of a defense. So he starts. I guess if it's in some ways an internal monologue, but it's not really an internal monologue because he's talking to like the voice of the god in his head, right? Or maybe not. It's not an explicit conversation, but he's reflecting on like his on Morgur's desires, and it turns out that like this was in some ways a test. This was a way for him to see the full strength of like the Incarnates, and this was just the beginning from his perspective. And that I'm trying to think. Basically, he's going to use this knowledge of the Incarnates and use it to his advantage, and maybe use it to become more powerful and enact Morgur's will.
Morgur. Get it?
Wait a sec, guys! It's literally in the name. This is wild.
Literally is in the name.
Oh my!
My mind is blown.
That was in the old world too.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
Yep.
That's hilarious.
So, anyways, the idea being that there's opportunity here for the Beastmen, and so although it's a lot of we'll watch out because next time we meet it's going to be bad. It's a classic villain parting thoughts, but it's hard not to read this and not expect like Beastmen to get some love in the future, right? It just seems like a telltale like evidence that like something more is coming for the Beastmen. They spent too much time in these pages hinting at more to come that they have to pay it off. I gotta imagine they will. What do you guys think?
I agree.
Yeah, it seems very much like they're setting something up, and it will have a payoff.
They better. I suppose I should have asked this listener question first before I went on my whole spiel right there. But a question from Tomb King Tristan, or might I add, patron Tomb King Tristan. But he asked, did you find any hints for the future? And this is my smoking gun hint to the future. This is my prime candidate for things to come down the line. Is this Beastman blurb about how they're not done yet. And what better time for the Beastmen to rise in this era of the beasts? So,
yep. Well, that and new incarnates, I think, too, has been hinted at in here that, the different realms manifest differently. Even though this type of incarnate is found all across all the realms, there are different manifestations of incarnates. So I definitely think we'll see varieties of those.
Another question from a listener, Meal Hearn, had asked, are there any other incarnates mentioned in the lore? They're not so much specifically identified, but rather maybe they generally allude to regions or realms that could generate incarnates. So again, building off of what Paul or Josh had just said, Paul, it sounded like you wanted to say something.
Well, the interesting thing to me about that, and you'll be the judge of that, is that Karazai knows what's happening and knows how it's affecting the realms. So I'm wondering if this is something that has happened before. Right? Like it implies that there is a history of this thing happening, which implies all kinds of stuff about what happened in the realms before. So I thought that was a cool little drop as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. He said he's been hearing the heartbeat for thousands of years, but so whether it happened before or not, that's a good question.
But then how does he know that it's because of the elementals? How did you know it was going to be here, and how did you know there's going to be more?
It's tough to say. More to come, I bet. We'll
Yeah, because it does say, Karazai snarls, and he says, Gur has not been free since long before your man god arrived, which implies that it was free at one point in time, right? So like you said, maybe he had known, a time in which it was free.
Yep.
Interesting. Good scrying phase, you guys. So Tomb King Tristan, patron of the show, to build off that, asks, how do we see them expanding on the concept, that is to say, of the incarnates? Do you guys have any thoughts on either the ways you would expect them to expand on the incarnates or the ways you would want them to expand on the incarnates? Any thoughts there?
I just like the idea that they might represent all these different kinds of realm stone in model form.
Yep.
That's my hope. And if they don't finish the cycle, so help me God, there's nothing worse than a started and not finished cycle.
Well, the interesting thing is they talk about these constructs as already that this type of construct is typically formed of realm stone and a variety of bones, and they're found across the realms, and they're all called the Kronspine incarnates. So they're already saying that this construct exists in all other realms using its own realm stone. So I think the more interesting question is, okay, well, what it alludes to other types of incarnates. What would those look like? If we have this bone primal type construct that's found across all the different realms, what might another one look like? Maybe it's more manifested of winds and lightning, or maybe one's water based, or is it more elemental or not? Or so that'll be kind of interesting to see how they might
A water-based incarnate is such a novel idea. Speaking of novels, if you want to know more about water-based incarnates, check out Kragnos, Avatar of Destruction.
There's a creature in there that isn't specifically named as an incarnate, but if it walks like a duck and squawks like a duck.
Hilarious!
Like a duck. But Josh, you bring up a good point. I think there's two vectors by how things can be different. One, there's going to be there ought to be incarnates based off of different realm stone, like we were talking about. What is an Olgu? What is, I can't remember what Olgu is. Why would I pick the one stone that I don't know? Versus.
You had 8 choices, Aaron.
Yeah, right. Well, I guess I can't think of, Yeah, I can't think of any of the other ones. So each realm may have its sort of representative incarnate, and that's probably what I imagine they'll do. Like for models, right? That's what they'll make, different realm models. But furthermore, we're talking about how the Kronspine incarnate doesn't just live in Ghur. Kronspine incarnates, which are creatures made from the Amberbone realm stone, those can still show up in different realms, which is then GW basically telling you, hey, you can use your incarnate no matter on what realm you're in for the game, right? So that's how they're getting around that. But in doing so, presumably they don't necessarily, I don't believe, have to look exactly the same, but rather there's a bunch of bones. But those bones can come from anywhere. Like they can come from tar pits from Akshi, or they can come from, and they list some other like
graveyards of Akshi, oily tar pits of Shaman, ravines of Lendu. Yeah.
Perhaps there could be, not necessarily bones, but like the shells of spiders or something like that.
Absolutely. Definitely. So on 2 different vectors, can you get creative with what your incarnate's going to look like? Whether you're going to use different realm stone, or you're going to use the same realm stone, but you're going to re-envision it in a different way because it comes from a different realm. So in some ways, it honestly complicates the issue, but I think it opens up the door for a lot of unique creativity.
And I would say you could even go a third vector of like what other incarnates can exist using Ghur Realmstone that's not bones. Like we talked about the living river in Kragnos.
Oh, true. Yeah.
There's so many different options that it's kind of hard to see where GW will go with it lore wise. What I assume will happen is we'll probably get something similar to like the Malign Sorcery box with just like a few examples from all the realms.
Yeah, good call.
From like a product standpoint, that's you kind of see that's where the direction they're going to go, right? Like these incarnates are the equivalent of the endless spells. Like it's this version of the endless spells. Which I mean, I don't mean to be dismissive of that. Like it still ends up being cool. It's just
I love it.
It's just a new way to introduce a similar concept. I really skipped over this question, but I don't want to leave a Carrion's question out, which is to say, they ask, is there any reference to the Lifequake impact on the realm beyond, now this is Aaron adding, beyond just like the Kragnos release, I think we owe to the Lifequake. I believe in the story, they just talk about how these incarnates are given life or, are awoken because of the Lifequake. So the incarnates are a direct result of that Lifequake.
Yep.
Do you guys have anything else to add to that?
Yeah. So part of the, like when we were talking about locations, we kind of glossed over the Gnarlwood, which is like a grove of trees in Thondia that has, it mentions it like super expanding and blossoming ever since the Rite of Life. So we can see like the areas where Sylvaneth used like have lived in other realms are growing. So their territory and this faction is growing in power even when they're not in Ghyran.
Yeah, a great example. And maybe another reason why Sylvaneth might be another army that we see get some love in the near future. Fingers crossed. That's me editorializing. I don't know anything. Cool. And then another question from Tristan is that he wanted to know if we felt that they did a good job explaining and placing the incarnates in the world. This is more of an opinion type question. What did you guys think about the implementation of the incarnate as we've seen here in this story?
I would say I think they did a good job. Like you can tell this, like the whole crux of this story was incarnates. Here they are. But I think they did a really good job of seeding it because we know enough about Ghur, we know enough about Thondia to see the effects of what the Incarnate is doing, to see people transforming under this Ghurish energy, to see the Stormcast themselves doing all this stuff, that like it easily could have been like, this is a story to introduce this thing, buy these models, please. But they really like tied into all of the existing lore and expanded on it in a way that I think was fulfilling.
Yeah, I think they did a good job. Well, I mean, to build off that point, in that they took a place that we kind of knew, and then they changed they used the place that we knew to illustrate the transitive properties of these incarnates, which is to say they were able to change the place that we knew, and it's all because of this new thing, right? So that helps, I guess, set the backdrop or give context to the new, the incarnate that they're trying to introduce. That I think helps frame it in a way that we can, maybe understand a little better. Hey, Will, do you want to ask your question about the other seasons of war? Kind of related to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, the question I had as a listener was, what other seasons of war would you want to see next?
Right. Yeah, we were kind of talking about other incarnates, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other seasons of war that we might investigate. Maybe they'll be tied together, or maybe it'll be sort of divorced entirely from the incarnate concept. But it seems weird that they would preface the title of this book with season of war if they didn't intend to reuse that term in the future. For me, because I had started talking and I can't seem to stop, I think highlighting famous areas or regions of the other mortal realms, it seemed the most likely, right? Like take whatever the Shaishian equivalent of Thondia is, which I think is probably the prime interlands, or whatever the continent is that, so Ymetrica in Hish, or the Great Parch of, actually I had to look at the map that's on my wall. So those, I know they seem broad, and I know they seem like places that we've really spent a lot of time in already, but I can see an opportunity to deep dive in those areas in the same way that we've done here in Thondia, just to really put a finer point on these places. Whether or not I want them to, maybe I would prefer them to go to more obscure locations that I've never heard of before. Really doesn't super matter because they didn't ask me, but I could see them going that way in the future.
I would love to see Seasons of War Rusted Wastes, because that was a cool place to begin with, and then they had a silver tower crash into it, so now it's a completely different place. So that could be a cool thing.
Yeah.
There's an older, I'm trying to remember the name of it. They came out with a campaign box where you could fight, like it was a map-based campaign where you fought in different regions in Akshi. And it was in the parched area. Can't remember what the name of it was, but it was a really cool box set. And what was that?
Seasons of War. I think it was just called Seasons of War.
No, it was the Flame something or other.
Yeah, Flame Scar Plateau.
Flame Scar Plateau.
Jinx.
Yeah.
Yep. But it described a lot of really interesting cultures that used to live there. Like these certain mages and these clockwork, constructs, and that would be a really cool place, I thought, to investigate further, and having these automatons perhaps wandering around, and how that might play into your games and that sort of thing.
Firestorm, right? Isn't that what it was?
Firestorm, yes,
Yeah.
That's what it was.
I had to look it up. Yeah, very cool. And so you can see sort of some of the similarities between that and this, right? It was an investigation. It was very region based. It was a dive into an area, but you can also tell that they had different, goals, or that the products were different things between that old Firestorm box and what they've done here with Season of War Thondia. Very neat. All right. Now for a very jarring transition for this section that probably belongs a little bit higher in the episode, but it's too late now. I can't fix it. After the story, they had added a...
Is that a bestiary?
Yeah, right. Basically a bestiary of a list of monsters that exist in the realm of Ghur from the sort of a first person perspective, or rather like notes being written about these creatures, which was a lot of fun to read through these and get just descriptions and a first person view of the monsters that populate the realms, both ones that we've seen before and those that we haven't. Which was also kind of fun, the mixture of the things we knew and the things we didn't. I don't know why I'm going on this long about this. Did you guys have any favorite creatures, monsters or otherwise, in this list that you guys wanted to chat about?
I love the barbed snifferweed spears because it's literally just foam balls with toothpicks in it. But that's now an official thing in Thondia. And it's actually one of the terrain rules as well, which is super fun.
Really?
Yeah, like so.
Yep.
You remember in 40K, where like for old 40K tables, they would just have a foam ball painted green, and they would put two.
Oh, yes, yeah. No, I definitely remember those.
That is exactly what the picture is. It's foam balls with toothpicks in them, and now they're an AOS terrain thing. So I thought that was super fun.
And they're ascension.
Yep.
They'll chase you down.
All right on. What about the rest of you? Do you guys have any beasts that you want to chat about?
Yeah, I really like the Jabberslythe. I've seen the model a few times. I've never really played against one or anything, but just the description of its, madness, inspiring, and its anatomy is hilarious. So I think it's pretty cool.
I bet $1 that we'll see a new Jabberslythe when the Beastmen get an update.
That would be cool.
That's my guess.
It is interesting with some of these where they talk about how certain beastmen follow it and they don't know why or whatever, so definitely kind of hinting towards, so maybe we'll get some more information about this in the future.
Yeah, hopefully. Will, what about you?
My favorite beast is a plant. It is the growl oak. It's
awesome.
just trees that will eat you and devour you, which is just great. It says they're filled with like air sacs to like lure people in thinking there's a fight going on. And in the picture, like all the roots end in like Venus flytraps type like plant mouths. I love it. Highlights the fact that like all of Ghur is going to eat you, even the plants.
Right. I love its reproductive, practice where it growls so that, oryx and other things come and beat on it, and then it spreads the spores and they carry it somewhere else.
It's just so creative.
I wanted to talk about creatures that we hadn't heard about before, and I don't believe these terror pins have ever come up, but it's these huge, like scaled, like shelled creatures. I mean, it's a punny name, right? Versus a terrapin, but they are swampland, wetland natives. They hang out in standing water, and they've got these, they can grow to like obscene sizes. They've got these huge shells that sometimes they can grow out of, and they can leave their shells and find.
Terrapins are a type of turtle.
Yep, exactly, right. So they've got the classic shell vibe to them. They're relatively sedentary, but they'll still eat you right up. And they've got toxic secretions from their claws that they like coat their beaks in, and so so there's kind of a double threat. They're toxic both at the claw level as well as the beak, and it sounds like some of these toxins that they produce are sometimes harvested by a certain breed of auric that like to deal in those toxins, which of course leads us to believe that the cruel boys will hunt these guys down and harvest their toxins for whatever their nefarious cruel machinations might be. So if you're ever traversing the swamps of Ghur, watch out for one of these terror pins.
This is my second favorite thing about this book. Is there was another section too earlier on, it kind of like inserted into the lore, where it had a couple little pages of just like little stories and stuff like that. But I really enjoy that because it reminds me a lot of the old Forge World books that they used to do, like Monstrous Arcana in particular. It had these little drawings, and it had the text and stuff because they didn't have most of the models done for Monstrous Arcana, so everything was a picture. And so I like this like journal presentation where somebody in world is presenting you with their opinion of what this thing is and like how it moves and evolves in the world. So I thought that was super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially some of the individual perspectives that the author offers, in terms of, every time I think of this, when I get these nightmares. And
That's true. That point reminds me of a barely even tangentially related point, but I like the trend of what they've been doing in the battle tomes, but then also in books like this, where whenever there's art, they put in a little like caption or a little phrase attached to these pictures that often has something to do with the picture at hand. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're just battle cries or something silly. But one of the pictures of one of the cruel boys on the giant vulture looking thing, they're attacking a bunch of stormcasts, and the caption below it is brutality and cunning are no match for faith. And the only reason I bring it up is because it's so odd to see the words brutality and cunning spelled correctly in relation to an orc picture because you're so used to seeing it, spelled with K's and without the end of the G. So obviously the point being is that like a Stormcast or someone is saying, brutality and cunning are no match for faith. It's utterly jarring to see the words spelled out completely in a Warhammer book.
Well, in the picture, it certainly doesn't look like the Stormcaster in the best position.
No, that's true, right? You're going to need some faith to get out of that one. All right. Any other beast blurbs or any other points you guys want to make about the book as a whole before we get into some final listener questions that didn't seem to really apply to anything else that we were talking about up above?
Just to like Paul's point of like the section we kind of missed over of like those little like journal blurbs.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
I really loved, there was one where it was like an ogre who was writing about like how they saw Kragnos as an avatar of the Maw, since everywhere he goes, he just makes huge mouths in the land. But they don't think he's good enough, so they're going to go teach him how to really eat stuff. And I just think that's the word.
It was awesome.
Like everyone, like you got the Oryx who see Kragnos as like the big boss, and they want to be the bigger boss. And then you got ogres who are like, yeah, but does this guy really know how to eat? Mm-hmm. Let's teach him something.
Oh, he's so skinny. You got to eat some meat on your bones, guy.
He has no appreciation for cuisine.
Yeah. I like some of those journal entries are neat because they highlight different factions that would have, some reaction to beasts sort of being in ascendancy. One of the little blurbs is like some Skaven talking to, or writing a missive to some other Skaven saying that they really got to keep an eye on those Molder Skaven because like they're getting a little too big for their britches and things might get out of control with this, the beasts getting larger and more feral, right? Because the Molder clans are all about like their mutated rats and stuff like that. So like again, yeah, it gives you an opportunity to think about how does this new era of beasts affect the armies that I know, and Molder is a prime example of someone who would really, or not someone's who would benefit from this new ferocity out in the world. So that was cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Right on. If there are no other general thoughts, well, I'm going to jump into these listener questions.
Can I jump in quick to the listener questions? Because I can answer 4 of them super quick.
Well,
yes.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So, first question from patron Tyromancer. Does it mention anything that has happened during the events of Hallowed Ground? No.
Not really, yeah.
Patron Klaus M.A. Does it nod to Harrow Deep or Cursed City? No, it does not. For Travis Griffin, thank you again for the question. Do we get any news about the big gods and what's going on with them? Does the Order Pantheon continue to fracture? We don't have anything about that in this book.
Yeah, also
right?
correct.
So those 3, all set and good. Now, patron Klaus M.A., does it move the overall story forward? Does it lend more weight to 3.0? Is Age of Beasts still a bit tame? Go. Answer.
Hey, good job. That's how I do it. Does it move the overall story forward? I don't know that it does. I mean, you could make the argument that Incarnates is somehow moving the story forward. I think it moves maybe the current story in a more fleshed out. I know this doesn't make any sense. It's a distinction without a difference, but it seems to be that it's not moving forward so much as it is enlarging the current story as it is. It's not doing the same job that Broken Realms did. I don't personally think. And so in doing so, well, I'll get into how I feel about that later, but forward doesn't feel like the direction that it's going currently. Now, that's not to say if more books like this don't come out, maybe the overall trend will be forward, but this one specifically isn't as forward as I would have liked. What do you guys think?
And I would say I agree with that wholeheartedly. And then for like the second part of the question, does it lend more weight to 3.0? I think it does lend more weight by not moving forward and by like zooming in. It's not like rushing past story beats. It's really showing you the effects of things that are happening, which I enjoy.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. That's true. I can see the benefit in that. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point because we got all the Broken Realms books, and they were really nice in terms of pushing the stories forward, and you got snapshots of what was going on, but I didn't feel like you got a whole lot of time to actually play in that space before the next one was out. So now it feels like we've kind of gotten to a place, and now we're kind of immersing ourselves in this period of history and getting to do more in this space before we move on to the next thing, and that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad people who play have the opportunity to do so. And sometimes I need to take a step back and realize that not everybody wants to maybe move at the breakneck pace that I want to. And so I can appreciate and appreciate the joy that, folks may get by taking a breather and, living in the space as it's presented to us. So right on. Kudos to you, Josh. All right, and then 1, 2, 3. I guess we got another question from Tomb King Tristan, patron and friend of the show. He asks, "What type of army would you build if you were starting from scratch to go with this book?" I wouldn't, but I'll ask you guys. What would you all do? Any ideas swimming in those noggins of yours?
Yeah, I've always been interested by Beasts of Chaos, and this kind of just encourages that, I think, in terms of, maybe there's a new battle tome coming out, but some other cool aspects and creatures and focusing on the beasts of Ghur. That's probably what I would do.
Yeah, very cool. Did this book inspire any of ideas in either you two, the rest of you?
Yeah, so it's not something we talked about here because it goes into rules, but one thing, bleh, right? But one thing's the Incarnate, or at the very least, Kronspine, the Incarnate can do is it can eat endless spells. So I really want to do an army of just like endless spell witch hunters, sort of like Duralia and Galen Van Denst, who have a Kronspine to help them kill endless spells.
Fun, yeah.
That would be cool. That's neat. Right on.
It's like the 4th time I've said this. So it has to happen now.
Yeah, exactly. You've committed yourself.
Oh, man. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that it'll be weeks before this episode comes out. So folks will have heard it already. Right on. And Paul, what do you think? Did this book inspire any armies for you?
It could be cool to do an army of the devolved humans that were in that Dawnbringer Crusade.
Yeah, sure.
That could be a cool thing. Mm-hmm. And then to ally in a Kronspine Incarnate to justify why that would be a thing. You could do a lot of fun little conversions and stuff like that. And it would definitely be a different Cities of Sigmar army for sure.
Yeah, true.
Right.
Hey, great ideas, guys. Hey, Tristan, there's some ideas for you right then and there. I think that covers the listener questions besides the last question that I'll get to when we do our final thoughts. Do you guys have any other points or topics or things that you guys want to chat about for this book before we get into our, like I said, final thoughts?
Did you guys want to talk about I know you had your own episode about the Path to Glory. Did you want to do a little blurb here just for people?
Yeah, you can do that. So if you're one of those people that does play and you are interested in the Path to Glory, we actually have done a review, and you can find it on the Path to Story podcast, right? Well,
exactly.
We definitely spent some time just sitting down and looking at everything and delving into it.
After you looked at it, did you then talk about it? Because it's not very good radio if you're just looking.
We looked at it, we talked about it, and we actually got to play it as well, which was super.
I would say if like the stories that we've talked about here as presented are intriguing to you and you would want to participate in them, the rules in this book do a great job of letting you do this. Like you can play through this storyline as its own separate campaign. And then you could also take all of these tools and then create your own stories with the same themes, which is really cool.
Yeah, it does sound. So check out the Path to Story podcast, available wherever you download podcasts, and also can be found at themortalrealms.com. But from there, let's go into our final thoughts, though I will couch it with this question from yet again from Dog Tired, patron of the show. They ask, is this book worth getting just for the lore? So I want to know what you thought about the book, and I also want to know if you think the book was worth getting just for the lore, just for the things that we've talked about here today. I
loved it. Absolutely. I didn't realize this is a book that I wanted until I read it, and I was like, this is a book that I wanted. And it I love how it fleshes out a specific part of the world. I love how it continues the story of Dominion, it ticks so many boxes. So is it worth getting just for the lore? Absolutely. There's massive amounts of lore and in a different way that we haven't had it presented before. So super cool.
Right on. Yep. Who's next?
Yep. I'll chime in as well. First of all, I will say thank you, Games Workshop, for sending us a copy of this book to read and share with you all. And yeah, no, I'm planning to buy it, even though I've read a lot of it already because it's amazing. It's got a lot of very good lore. I think the Path of Glory, I haven't played it myself yet, but I'm really excited about it. And I think the information in this book, kind of lends itself to pulling your armies into Ghur, and what would that look like, and where might they be, and so there's a lot of background and things that are kind of spinning in my head based on what I read in here, and I really enjoyed it myself. And I think it's a great way to cement everything, all the Black Library material and everything that's happened so far in one book, like we've talked about. And I think that's the first time I've kind of really seen that before.
Right on. Hey, Will, what did you think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I'm definitely going to get the book for myself, partially just because I like having all the books, but also
That's
because
weird.
I do,
Who would do that?
What kind of sick? But I did really enjoy the story. As far as is it worth getting just for the lore? If you already know about Ghur and you already know the things that could happen in Ghur and are invested in Ghur, I definitely think the book is worth it. If you know nothing about Ghur, then this is the book. This book has everything. It gives you the entire lowdown on the realm and has what you need. So I do think it is worth getting.
Okay, right on. All right, so from my vantage point, did I like the book? I definitely like the book. I love these campaign books, and these are probably my favorite types of things that they put out, whether it's, Broken Realms or, but now Seasons of War, or, heck, even the books that they put in those box sets. I know there's not a lot of similarity, but there's still the commonalities across them that I really enjoy. And so those are the things I most look forward to. It was a little different, this Season of War book, compared to, like I said, Broken Realms, where that's much more big names, big characters, big events happening. And this is more of maybe a fallout from those larger events. And then, a region investigation, a setting book, if you will. And so in doing so, it does a little bit of different work than those campaign books, but I think it scratches a lot of similar itches as well. However, to the question of, is this book worth getting just for the lore? I will say yes, but it's not a strong yes. I'll give it a tentative yes, or a tepid yes, in that it's hard to remove myself or take a step back from what I know and what I appreciate from these books compared to what other people might get out of it. There may be a situation, depending on who you are and how well versed you are in the mortal realms, or there may be other books maybe more worth getting. Again, if maybe you're more interested in those big events, those big happenings in the world, and less interested in deep dives into a given setting like we just talked about, there may be better books out there for you, better campaign books, like the Broken Realms may scratch a better itch or a different itch for you. I just like complete pictures, and like how these books come at the mortal realms from different perspectives, or at different angles, or at different levels, right? And so in doing so, I think this again, like I said, it completes a picture for a region that we thought we knew a lot about, but there's always more to learn. The story wasn't super engaging, especially when compared to those Broken Realms stories. And maybe that's where I get a little bit of my hangups, right? Is because it was very simple. It was very straightforward. There's a lot of just straightforward back and forth fights, all to lead up to this, what clearly was a way to introduce a new model, which is, although a very cool model, it reminds me that these are stories in service to a game. And I wasn't able to necessarily trick myself into thinking that this is, these are stories for the sake of stories. But that's fine. You get used to it if you follow Warhammer long enough. But
well, it sounds like we just got to read Kragnos.
Yeah, right, you do. Yeah. Well, that was really great.
Well, I was going to say, because I answered the question of for the lore, in the sense of the building of the world and things like that. If you are asking, is this book worth it just for the story and moving the narrative forward? I would say probably not.
Yeah, right. And
honest.
So that's how I'm kind of looking at it. There's two ways to look at what is lore in this question, right? World building, yeah, sure, does a pretty good job. But story wise, what ended up being sort of the second half of our review here, it it wasn't meant to be this ground shaking story. It was a way to, ease you into the introduction of this new thing that you'd never seen before. And so
If you want
I get
ground shaking, you should read Kragnos.
oh, that was
God of Earthquakes
That was
is great at ground shaking.
that was perfect, Paul. That might have been your best joke of all time, I think. I can't think of a better one. And you know what? Maybe on that note, we'll just end on that high note. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before we close her out? God, that was good. All right, cool. Here we go. It's time for our reforging. The Sigmar Willing will be back soon. Like, subscribe, share, or leave a review. Join us on Discord, drop a tip on our Patreon. Anything you can do will spread the word of Sigmar farther than we can on our own. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter, @TheMortalRealms. Paul, where can they find you online?
At PJ Shard.
Hey, Will, where can they find you online?
At Severalon.
Excellent. And Josh, where can they find you on the internet?
At J.E. Arrington.
See how I mixed it up? I went online and then internet. And then I'm Aaron. You can find me on Twitter at Dosasos, and you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. All right, right on. Pavend is not here. Dan, I'm just reading the line. Why would I do that? Josh, you're actually next. Who's here? What have you been doing? Oh my God, what's wrong with me? Hey, Josh. Hey, what have you been doing in the hobby today?
Eric, Vint, and I have been working on.
Trick is to never say anything out loud. Oh, now that ruined my joke. I poked my mic. Don't ever say anything out loud. Such a good goof.